Hello and welcome to the final week of ONTV's Fantasy Football League. I am the commish, Joe Johnson, and I am joined here by the 2016 champions, Garrett and Anthony. King Kolodziej Ant. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
You guys can see this trophy on the table. That is the first ever ONTV Fantasy Football Championship trophy. You guys get to have bragging rights for a year. Let's go back to, well, first of all, let's kind of recap the game, and then we'll go back to like draft day or whatever. Now, heading into week 17, which is a little unusual. Most fantasy leagues don't go into week 17, but I think just because of the way our league was structured, we were sort of forced to do 2-week playoffs, which took us right up into week 17. Now, heading into week 17, you had about a 50-point lead, right?
Yeah.
So
53, I think.
53.
yeah. So you were pretty confident going in, but lo and behold, as Sunday wound down, Ian pulled it within 1 point at the gun. Let's take a look at the scores here, including the benches.
And we had some unfortunate luck with a few guys going down. We'll get into that, obviously.
Well, you know, like I said earlier, the problem with playing into week 17 is teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers did not play all their starters.
Which is why Le'Veon Bell's on my bench.
Exactly.
D'Angelo Williams is in his lineup.
Exactly. So that makes things interesting. Now, let's look at Witherspoon's score. Drew Brees really came through, 26 points against Atlanta, and we predicted a shootout between the Saints and Atlanta. Neither one of them have any defenses to really speak of.
Correct.
So Brees put up 26 points. Let's look at his stat line. He had 300 and, what is that?
50 yards.
50 yards, 2 touchdowns to produce 26 points. A typical Brees game. Who finished as the top quarterback in fantasy, and so he came through in that final week.
As expected, with a team. Atlanta only had to win to get in and be the number 2 seed. So for them, as long as they held that bad Saints team in check, I think they were going to relatively do their job. And now, obviously, questions in New Orleans: is Sean Payton going to keep his job?
I felt that there were 2 games. If you looked at Ian's results, there's 2 games that really come to mind. There was the New Orleans versus Atlanta game, which he has a boatload of players from both teams, and then he had the Lions and the Packers, where Ian made, and I give him a lot of props for, he made a great move getting Zach Zenner.
Yeah,
it was a very good move. He went to the
yes,
and he
we almost went that way with Zach Zenner. We passed him up, and it almost bit us in the butt.
So let's talk about this first. We were talking about the Atlanta-New Orleans game and how loaded Ian is. Also on his starting lineup was Devontae Freeman. Now let's talk about Freeman a little bit. In 2015, he carried a lot of teams, was putting up a ton of points through half of 2015. Then he hit the wall, disappeared from the radar. This year, I think, with Tevin Coleman getting a nice bulk of the carries, that seemed to take the load off Freeman, and he was consistent all the way up to the end of the season, including week 17. And Freeman had 96 yards, just short of 100. And a touchdown. And so Freeman really came through and I think helped a lot of teams reach the playoffs.
Mr. Consistency, and I would compare Devontae Freeman almost to our Le'Veon Bell. You know, he really carried the workload, and he single-handedly put Atlanta in that position, put a lot of fantasy owners in that position to get to the final.
And he's going to be a high draft pick, I think.
No
Absolutely.
doubt.
Same with David Johnson, same with a few of these other guys as well that we saw kind of blossom this year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not Todd Gurley, who we took 3rd overall.
Yes,
that's
true.
A big question mark on next draft.
That's true.
Now, on the other side of the ball, my God, 69 points. If you put that up during a regular season, that would not result in a win. Single digits. I noticed this. I was talking about this last week. Adam Thielen, he's Vikings wide receiver. had a monster game last week. In one of my leagues, I had benched him because he had gotten hurt the week before, and he put up, in that league, 60 points or something. So, riding on that success of last week, you put him in your starting lineup against Chicago, which most would say, yeah, that's good.
Well, I'll take full credit for that, Joe. What happened was we needed a wide receiver. Moncrief was hurt, wasn't going to play. Final game of the season, so needed a wide receiver.
Yeah.
And Thielen was there. I saw what he did last week, and I figured, okay, Bears not good. He's the number one target. I know that Minnesota doesn't have anything to play for, but then I also figured, okay, he's going to get his touches.
Yeah.
He didn't get his touches.
What happened? Were they just saving him?
I don't know.
One reception for 7 yards. So.
From what I heard, from what I had heard, I believe that they were thinking that he was having some lingering effects from the injury from 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So I guess they weren't really putting him in the mix. And for a team obviously not in a playoff hunt, makes sense Week 17 to do that. And that's one of the disadvantages of Week 17 is unfortunately you get that to happen. But, it wasn't all bad. I mean, this is a championship team, so I'm not going to sit here and complain too much, Joe, about it.
And then you could also say the same thing about with starting Cousins over Luck, because if Cousins was playing for something, whereas Luck was not really playing.
Yeah.
And
Cousins came up short.
He wanted Cousins in the lineup, but I'm not gonna do Anthony like that. So
yeah,
I regret it. I kind of do regret it.
And then of course you lost McCoy to injury. That was a tragic injury, and he's. Have you heard any updates on him? Is he? Wonder what they're saying about.
Yeah,
his,
I'm not sure. I
injury.
haven't heard anything about him, Joe. I haven't heard his status for next week against the Lions, so I'm about as unsure as you are.
Yeah. All right. Well, we wish LaShawn McCoy the best. Now let's look at our benches here. Not a whole lot on Ian's bench. Jonathan Stewart, I believe, found the end zone on Sunday. He produced 12 points. If he would have started Stewart didn't outscore any of his running backs, not even Zenner, who scored 16. So that wouldn't have been. He actually would have lost points had he started Stewart in place of any of his running backs.
John Brown, if he would have started John Brown, he would have tied. And actually, Brandon Cooks left that game with an injury as well.
Yeah.
So that was kind of rough.
Had 5. I wouldn't have taken that chance.
See, he was stuck in an interesting predicament as well with a lot of these guys. You don't know who's going to play and who's not going to play because of injury or teams being out of the hunt and giving their guys simply put just some rest.
Yeah.
We were also very fortunate, too, that during the Green Bay Lions game, as tough as this sounds, had Matt Stafford thrown the touchdown to either Ebron or Zenner, we would not be sitting here today.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. I have something here. I'm hoping we're going to be able to hear this. If the laptop has a speaker on it, I'm going to see if I can lean in so you guys can hear this.
Hello, Joseph. Orion Neighborhood Television. Garrett. Anthony. I'd like to extend my sincere congratulations to you, Mr. Kolodziej, and Anthony. Tried my darndest. Tried my absolute darndest. I was edged by 1 point. To the victors, go the spoils. Congratulations. I'll see you next year. And so will Nora.
You know what, Joe? You can hear the pain in his voice.
Yeah, you can.
Even with him actually being at the game on Sunday, with him losing the way that he did, there is still pain in his voice.
There is.
Thank you, Ian Witherspoon. We know you gave us a tough test, but you were a true competitor, and we will see you next year. Hopefully, we'll see if he can take us down next year.
I've always said when it comes to fantasy football, I would rather get blown out, especially in a championship game, than to lose by 1 point. Because then you start questioning, what if I would have started him? What if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? To lose by 1 point
creates a lot of stress.
Well, here's my approach to this. First things first. First things first to Ian. I'm glad that here's my response to Ian. Thank you for the nice compliment. It was very nice. You gave us a hard-fought battle. You truly, truly worked your heart off. You deserved, you deserve to be where you're at. You led the league for a little while. You led the league for a little while. You were arguably probably the best team in the league for a while, and you worked very, very hard to get to that spot. Again, congratulations. Also, wish you nothing but the best going forward in the future. And also, Ian, welcome back home to Between Taraminas. We missed you. You'll be back home soon.
All right. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with ONTV's Fantasy Football League.
Every day, 2,500 teenagers nationwide using prescription drugs to get high for the first time.
Accessing these drugs is as easy as opening a cupboard, drawer, or medicine cabinet in any home, including your own. But you can do your part to prevent prescription drug misuse
by talking to your teen or young adult about the dangers of prescription and over-the-counter drug misuse. In Oakland County, prescription drug misuse is real. It's growing and it's dangerous. Do your part, be the solution. Visit doyourpart.info to learn more.
All right. Here, you can run that on. Welcome back to ONTV's Fantasy Football League.
Nice catch, Joe.
Now, what I want to do, I want to go back to draft day. I want to talk about your strategy on draft day. What do you think were some of your hits? What do you think were some of your misses? Go back to draft day and tell me what was going on.
Yeah, I'll kind of lead off, and then Anthony will pick up as well. I think, Joe, one of the things, and I'd stressed this to Ant the day that we drafted, was I always like to go running back heavy. I always like to have a stable of backs because, as we know and as we've even seen this year, all different kinds of running backs and players go down during the year. Injuries are inevitable in the NFL and in fantasy football. So I wanted to be able to prepare my team, and his team rather, this joint effort. We wanted to be able to prepare this team for anything that came in its way. So I figured to myself that, okay, the first 7-8 rounds wanted to get as many running backs as I could, or at least as many quality running backs. And the fact that we had Todd Gurley as our 3rd overall pick, I believe the next draft pick we ended up using that on Le'Veon Bell. That came with some criticism as well. Then Andrew Luck and then LaShawn McCoy. It was nice to have those 3 guys that I didn't have to worry about. We actually ended up trading Todd Gurley for Marvin Jones in the middle of the year, which was, some people thought was kind of an interesting trade-off at the time, but actually,
in hindsight,
yes,
when you see what Gurley did all season long, turned out to be a good move.
And Marvin actually had, it wasn't the fact that Marvin Jones wasn't productive, it was the fact that he wasn't getting touchdowns like he was early in the season.
We also needed a wide receiver help as well.
We did. So that was probably our weakest part of the lineup, was the wide receiver position, but I think I wanted to draft running backs because I know that they're very versatile with both their passing and their rushing ability. And so the fact that I was able to, along with Ant, draft 4 quality running backs with LeGarrette Blount, LaShawn McCoy, I was able to get
Bell and
then Gurley, and then we ended up actually pulling off a halfway decent move and got Rawls, and we kind of had some guys bounce back and forth. But the fact that we had at least 3 of those guys in that spot was nice because I didn't have to worry about my running back position virtually the entire year.
It's an interesting strategy because, as we've seen in the NFL over the past couple seasons, the NFL has become a pass-happy league. The thing with running backs is not a lot of teams in the NFL have that one guy. The majority of the teams in the NFL have running back by committees. And so the running back that gets the bulk of the carries has so much value because they're not sharing carries with other backs. And so your strategy ended up working out that you guys got some backs that were getting the majority of the workload. Now, Bell, he was suspended the first couple of weeks of the season. So that's, people said, oh, do you want to risk a pick on Bell? But once he hit the ground running and was a valuable asset most of the season.
Well, just like how Joe Velez also drafted Tom Brady as well. And he
sure.
hit the ground running. And quite frankly, Tom Brady almost put him back into that playoff talk.
That's
I mean,
true.
he was doing really well with David Johnson on his roster. But, no, you're right. Some people didn't take the risk, but I figured, and you hit a good point there. Now, not only are running backs, by committee, but they're also guys who can be good pass catchers. And I also want to get myself guys who are good pass catchers on this lineup so that way Ant and I didn't have to worry about it because, some leagues, they're PPR leagues, so they get, points per reception, so Le'Veon Bell.
That's a change we're going to make next season.
Yeah.
I didn't realize when we set up the league at the beginning of the season that ESPN's default wasn't a PPR league. So we're going to change that next season and add some points per catches. I think that's going to shake things up a little bit.
Because, as you mentioned, the NFL is going to more of a pass-happy league, and so I think it was important to, like I said, I think it was important that we focused primarily on running back. Quarterback play, I think Ant can mention, and you could take over here. I think we were really impressed by that.
Yes, it was interesting because I really wanted to get Tom Brady, but Garrett wanted to look at Andrew Luck. So ultimately we went with Andrew Luck, and then we also went with Kirk Cousins as well. So it ended up being a benefit to have having that luxury of having two very good quarterbacks. And
now one of my strategies on draft day, I don't like having two stud quarterbacks. I don't like facing the dilemma of which quarterback do I start from week to week. And you start one and the other one blows up, and you start the other one and the other one blows up. Right. Now, I remember on draft day, when you drafted Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton, my comment to you was,
we had a good
great pick 3 years ago. How did you feel about Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton? Do you feel they had a bounce back season this year?
They did. I felt that they had their moments where they had some really good games, and they had some moments where but I felt it was a nice bounce back.
It was interesting because Andrew Luck had a lot of criticism coming in. He was coming off an injured year. Not very good offensive line, and Indy's not had a great offensive line even this year. I think that's going to change in the offseason because I think the Colts kind of realize that. They have to protect this guy. He's their franchise.
Yeah.
He's everything for them. He's Mr. Everything. So I think the fact that he had to face with that adversity, Frank Gore slowing down, I was actually thoroughly impressed. I mean, there were some weeks where T.Y. Hilton kind of had 1-2 points, but at the end of the day, he's the NFL wide receiver. Yards leader. I mean, that says something right there. He was Mr. Consistent, even though it looked like there were some weeks where he wouldn't put up more than 20 yards.
Yeah. I have to say, for me, one of the biggest surprises of the 2016 season is Kirk Cousins. We mentioned this on the show before, but at the beginning of the season, I remember seeing some reports that there was some animosity in the locker room.
Yes, there was.
His team was turning on him, and I don't know what happened after that, but he put up some pretty good numbers the rest of the way. Did you find yourself, if I were to go back and look at the schedule, did you find yourself starting Cousins more or Luck more, or did you just play the matchups? What did you do?
I think we varied by matchup. Yeah. I think we went by matchup.
I would probably say that I think for us, we probably gave the slight upper hand to Luck maybe first because the AFC South isn't as good of a division, but it was primarily, when we looked at it, primarily matchup.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, it was primary matchup that we looked at every week. We looked at our, and obviously with you guys you guys didn't have to worry about consulting, whereas me and Garrett would consult and we would talk to each other about what is best for our team.
And it actually came down to that as well too, with our consulting, being that we were kind of co-owners as well with waiver wire and free agency and what to do there, because there were a couple.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the waiver wire. Talk about how you handle the waiver wire this season, and what do you feel were some of your biggest gains during the season?
Well, I think we can both admit that waiver wire actually wasn't particularly kind to us.
No, it was not.
Although we got lucky, though, in some ways, because I think the one thing that we both got, or we had some luck. There were a couple weeks where our wide receiver depth wasn't great, so I remember, and I talked with Ann about this, that we picked up Jordan Matthews, and he ended up having a couple stud weeks where he ended up pulling in double-digit points. Ryan Matthews, we needed running back help at some point. We did that.
We were talking before the show. I want you to share your thoughts on Delaney Walker. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, we ran into a little bit of a predicament where we had Stephen Hausch goes on a bye week. We needed a couple guys to fill in this and that, and a tight end this year was so bad. So We originally had Dwayne Allen and Julius Thomas. They didn't work out. I saw Delaney Walker kind of sitting on the scrap heap on tight end, and I figured, okay, well, he's primarily Marcus Mariota's number one option down in Tennessee, so I figured I'd give him a chance, and he ended up paying off dividends for us. He'd probably be the most consistent guy. I didn't have to worry about him. I only want, and I think Ant and I would both agree that we only wanted to carry one tight end.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can carry two, but then you also run into that matchup as well. It's one of those positions, kind of like defense, where some people just want to have one position and you pick up based off a need. And that's what we did there. But we didn't do good in waiver wire, but I also wanted to make sure that I believed in the players that we had on our roster. I knew that the guys that we had solid depth. I knew that we had pretty good wide receiver help from about 1, 2 quarterbacks are good. So really there weren't that many pieces we needed to pursue on the waiver wire.
Yeah. Looking back on this season, I think one thing people remember about 2016 is the fact that a lot of people that we thought were going to be studs at the beginning of the season just did not come through. And a lot of guys you wouldn't have expected to put up the numbers that they put up this year was a surprise. So talk about that. Who were let's call it studs and duds. Who were the studs of 2016 in your opinion, and the duds of 2016?
I would say Zeke Elliott, for one, was a very big stud, and I think that was a very good acquisition John Atwater got. He gave John Atwater a lot of points.
I would say another thing as well too. Two of them come to my mind as well. Kevin McCormick drafting Dak Prescott. I mean, we knew that Dak Prescott was going to be the starter in week 1, but we had no idea that he was going to, play at this level and literally put the Cowboys in this position. So I think that was one thing as well. And then also, too, just how good Le'Veon Bell was. And I'm really not saying that just because he was on our team.
Yeah, really thankful.
But he misses the first 3 weeks, and you figure, okay, a guy's going to take a couple weeks. I think he finished second or third in the league in rushing and total touches. And he missed 3 weeks because of a suspension for, I think it was the drug policy in the NFL.
Yeah, the drug policy.
And that's unbelievable to me. I mean, I think we both knew drafting Le'Veon Bell there was a risk, but I didn't think it was going to end up being, I think,
it was a high risk, high reward type of situation.
Same thing with Brady. I mean, we all know Brady's a Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer. But he misses the first 4 games of the season. He ends up being a top 3, top 4 quarterback on the season, missing 4 games. If he would have started the season at the beginning, he would have been 2016's number 1 quarterback.
No doubt.
No doubt.
No, if he didn't miss those first 4 weeks, he would have been the second. He would have had all the passing yards and things like that. Although I will say this year, the one quarterback that was kind of on the scrap heap a lot of the year was Jameis Winston. I thought he really stood out, and probably a lot of owners. I think next year, if he has a good training camp, I think he'll be a guy that you probably start seeing more people draft in their leagues.
We'll see. My concern about Jameis Winston, I traded for him in one of my other leagues, and I was kind of fooled by the fact that a lot of his touchdowns were garbage touchdowns.
Yeah.
The Bucs were behind. He had to throw. He was throwing in the end zone, scoring touchdowns. And so I ended up trading for him in one of my leagues, and he just didn't do it for me. I kept losing with Jameis Winston. So did he benefit from garbage time during 2016? I guess that's a wait and see in 2017.
But with regards to your duds.
Yeah, let's talk about duds. Who are the biggest disappointments?
I would say Todd Gurley.
Todd Gurley and Adrian Peterson. I mean, I know Peterson was hurt, but I mean,
give Peterson a pass because he was hurt most of the year.
Yeah, but when he was in there too, he still wasn't as effective. Yeah. But Todd Gurley, I think, is the biggest one.
Yeah, he gets my vote for the biggest stud. I had him in 2 of my leagues, and I refused to give up on him. I stuck with him, and the Rams just got worse and worse and worse as the season
Well, they gave
progressed.
up on Jeff Fisher, and and they gave up on him. So
another big disappointment for me, not that I had him in our league, but in some of my other leagues, I had DeAndre Hopkins. And what a bust he was. And I don't think it was entirely his fault. I think the quarterback situation in Houston is what caused it. But what a big disappointment. He was one of the top wide receivers of 2015. And I think he ended up scoring 3, maybe 4 touchdowns on 2016. What a big disaster that turned out to be.
It wasn't good for anybody. It was a really odd situation that happened, and for some fantasy owners it just didn't work out. Although I was going to say too, first half of the year you possibly could have put Odell Beckham on there as well. He didn't
Yeah,
have a good
that's
first
true.
half.
Slow start.
Yeah.
Did not score his first touchdown.
He was
until
running
week
away with
5.
the dud of the year, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden he really turned it around, and the Giants kind of flipped it around and really did well there.
Yeah, and luckily he had a couple of monster games. He had one game that he caught for over 200 yards and multiple touchdowns. So he kind of made up for it, and he ended up making the Pro Bowl, of course. Eli Manning, though, the guy that was throwing to him all year, is he done? I mean, I feel like his skills are on the decline.
He might be.
So many
We'll
people
have to see.
reverted to the turnovers.
We'll have to
and-
see.
He's on the downslope. I think him and Breeze are probably close to being done. I think every time I look at Drew Brees, even throwing in Phillip Rivers as well, I feel like those three guys are probably closer to the end than they are the beginning. And it's such a shame because they're, they were so
Brees finished
accomplished.
the #1 fantasy quarterback. Again, was that garbage time? Was he throwing a lot of touchdowns at the end of the game just trying to make it close?
Well, don't
You
forget,
could
New
argue
Orleans'
that.
defense was horrible. So
Yeah,
And
we had
now
to
there's
do that.
questions of Sean Payton's job
Right.
down in New Orleans, and that's, I think, legitimate, especially to consider Drew Brees isn't a young man. I mean, he's 38 years old, or I think he's 38. So
Here's an interesting strategy for draft day 2017. Do you draft quarterbacks with terrible defenses? Because it doesn't matter what kind of stats you're putting up in the NFL. If you're throwing garbage time touchdowns, those are touchdowns in fantasy football. And again, this is something we talked about earlier in the season. A lot of people were on Aaron Rodgers all season saying, what's wrong with Aaron Rodgers? What's wrong with the Packers? Aaron Rodgers had a monster fantasy season. Again, a lot of that was throwing the ball a lot at the end of games that were out of reach.
Right.
But Rodgers turned out to be a top fantasy quarterback. I think he was number 2 behind Breeze. So what do you think of that strategy come draft day? Draft quarterbacks with terrible defenses.
Risky.
But it also depends on who's. It's also a matchup
Right.
thing too. But it would make sense. I mean, Matt Ryan also had a good year this year too, and Falcons don't necessarily have the greatest defense in the world. They don't light the world on
Exactly.
fire. So,
But they were the #1 scoring offense in the league.
they were. So I mean, so that kind of bodes to what you're trying to say. So, it's interesting. I think it's
thinking about it, aren't
I think it's I think it's an interesting proposition. One also note too, Joe, that I think we could possibly see the flexibility of guys. I think this year, most notably at the end of the year, you had guys like Ty Montgomery, Tyreek Hill, a guy who plays both wide receiver and running back. I think we're going to start seeing that be a trend now where you have guys play both of these positions, and I think those guys will have even more value on the fantasy football roster.
I got to give Sammy a lot of credit for Ty Montgomery because I got to give my brother Sammy a lot of credit for drafting Ty Montgomery because
He drafted him, or
he picked him up.
Picked him up,
Sorry,
yeah.
He picked him up, but I give him a lot of credit for that.
yeah. What's is it Tyreek Hill, the guy in Kansas City?
Yes.
Yes.
Ian Locke picked him up late in the season, and
He helped
we
him.
we played each other at the end of the season,
Yeah.
and he put up some monster points at the end of the season.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
I think that's really where it's going. I think you having guys in multiple positions that can contribute like that are all around the field. I think that's going to be the trend for 2017. I really
Yeah.
do.
I've always liked drafting players that could play multiple positions, including returning kicks, because it was always so exciting to have a guy in your starting lineup who would return a kick back for a touchdown. It was always really exciting. So. All right, I think it's about time we start to wrap up. Guys, for our first ONTV Fantasy Football League, it was a lot of fun, a lot of trash talking. That's what made it great.
Ian
And,
Weatherspoon, the king and queen of trash talk,
got-
always bashed me.
Joe,
every
we
week,
got
saying-
very fortunate. Joe, we scored a lot of points this year. We just got lucky, and we were the #1 team heading into it, and we did it. So it was really nice, and it was a pleasure having you bringing us along.
right.
So
You run a
Congratulations.
tremendous league. You do
Thanks.
a fantastic job.
We'll make some tweaks. We'll get back into it on draft day in September 2017. Enjoy your bragging rights for a year, and we'll see you next fantasy football season. Thanks for watching. Hope you had fun. We'll see you next time.